Hi everyone, welcome to OptiNourish, the East-West Longevity Protocol. I'm your host, Ivy Lau. If you want to keep your brain sharp, your body active, and your spirit resilient as you age, you're in the right place. In this podcast, we explore brain health and healthy aging by bringing together modern science and traditional medical wisdom. Each episode draws on the clinical insights of Dr. Jingduan Yang, a board-certified psychiatrist and expert in integrative medicine, through his ACEs model of health: anatomy, chemistry, energy, and soul. Together, these four dimensions form the foundation of healthy aging and lifelong brain health. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for personalized medical advice. Now, let's begin. Episode 1. The Metabolic Cliff. Why Qi deficiency is a cellular emergency. Picture this. You slept 8 hours. Good sleep. The kind that earns you a little trophy from your fitness tracker. You wake up, and your body feels like lead. Your mind is sluggish. By 2 p.m., you're already thinking about your third coffee. You see your doctor. Full blood panel. Thyroid? Normal. Vitamin D? Good. Blood sugar? Perfect. Your doctor looks at your results and says, "It's just part of getting older." But what if I told you this fatigue isn't an inevitable part of aging? In March 2025, Professor Mark Mattson from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine published a groundbreaking study in Frontiers in Science, using one precise metaphor to describe the midlife energy crisis: the metabolic cliff. A young brain has metabolic flexibility, like a hybrid car, seamlessly switching between different fuels. But an aging brain loses this redundancy. Energy networks begin to cluster and rigidify. When one pathway fails, the entire system crashes. This isn't a metaphor. This is the biological reality you're experiencing. I'm Ivy. Welcome to OptiNourish, the East-West Longevity Protocol. Today, we're cracking a millennia-old puzzle. What does traditional Chinese medicine's Qi deficiency mean in modern biology? And this answer might completely rewrite how you understand fatigue. Fatigue is everywhere. According to recent surveys, over 40% of adults deal with persistent tiredness. And I don't mean just occasionally, or during a particularly stressful week. It's a chronic, unexplainable exhaustion. And here's the wild part. Many of these people are already doing everything right. They have the clean diet, they exercise regularly, get enough sleep. They're even doing the meditation, the supplements, and using the standing desk. Yet, that crushing afternoon slump still hits them like clockwork. Why is that? It's because we've been treating fatigue as a lifestyle problem, when it's actually a biological problem. Let me take you into the cellular world for a second. Inside nearly every single cell in your body, and we have billions of them, there are these tiny structures called mitochondria. You've probably heard them called the powerhouse of the cell. But honestly, they're so much more than just power plants. Think of them as the central bank. Mitochondria don't just produce energy, they actually regulate how much energy your body is allowed to spend. And they do this by manufacturing a molecule called ATP. This is our universal energy currency. Every heartbeat, every single thought runs on it. Now here's where Eastern wisdom meets Western science. In traditional Chinese medicine, there's this core concept called Qi deficiency, or Qi Su. If you see a TCM doctor with shortness of breath, fatigue, and a pale tongue, they'll tell you, "You have Qi deficiency." This sounded pretty mystical to the Western ear. But when experts like Dr. Jingduan Yang looked through the microscope, they discovered a stunning correspondence. What Chinese medicine has called Qi for thousands of years is, at the cellular level, exactly what we call ATP. Think about it. Qi generates energy, distributes it, and keeps you functioning under stress. That is the exact biological job description of ATP. It's the same exact phenomenon, just described in two different languages. A study in geroscience actually confirmed that our mitochondrial efficiency drops about 8% per decade as we age. So, whether an ancient doctor diagnoses qi deficiency by looking at your tongue, or a modern doctor measures your ATP production through a mitochondrial lab test, they are observing the exact same biological truth. They're just using different tools. You have fuel, which is your food. You have oxygen, and your mitochondria are ready to go. But to actually ignite this engine, you need an ignition switch. That switch is a coenzyme called NAD+. If mitochondria are the engine, NAD+ is the ignition system. Without it, fuel can't burn, and energy simply can't be produced. On a molecular level, it helps enzymes in the mitochondria do their work by shuttling electrons, which is what drives that ATP synthesis we talked about. Put simply, without NAD+, your mitochondria literally cannot function. Look at this critical piece of data. In February 2022, the journal Nature Aging published a landmark study. Scientists from the University of Amsterdam and Maastricht University compared the muscle metabolomes of young and elderly individuals. They measured 137 different metabolites. And guess what? Among all the metabolites that declined with age, NAD+ showed the single most significant drop. And it gets more interesting. The researchers found that elderly individuals with impaired physical performance had the absolute lowest NAD+ levels. But on the flip side, those who exercised regularly had NAD+ levels that were almost identical to young people. Their NAD+ levels directly correlated with their daily step count. This isn't a coincidence. Because NAD+ doesn't just support energy production, it also fuels your internal repair systems, particularly a group of longevity genes called sirtuins. These are responsible for DNA repair, inflammation control, and how your cells handle stress. So, when NAD+ is scarce, your body has to make a pretty brutal trade-off. Do I survive today, or do I repair damage for tomorrow? And most of the time, your body chooses today. This is exactly why fatigue is often the very first symptom, long before any actual disease shows up on a medical test. Your body is rationing energy. It's cutting non-essential expenses just to maintain core survival. In Chinese medicine terms, this is the exact biological reality of a deficiency of vital qi. Now, let's return to that metabolic cliff we mentioned earlier. That 2025 study constructed what is honestly the most comprehensive brain metabolic model to date. They looked at over 16,000 biochemical reactions across neurons, astrocytes, and the vascular system. And the researchers discovered a really striking phenomenon. In a young brain, metabolic pathways are widely distributed and deeply connected. If one pathway fails, others can easily step in and compensate. The system just has a lot of natural redundancy and resilience. But as the brain ages, these pathways begin to cluster. They become tighter and much more rigid. Think of it this way. A young brain is like a massive highway network with multiple routes to get you to your destination. But an aging brain? It starts to look more like a single-lane road, where one single traffic jam can paralyze the whole city. And this explains so much of what we experience every day. It's why young people can recover from an all-nighter almost instantly, while older adults might need several days to bounce back. It's why the exact same stress that a 20-year-old handles with ease can cause someone in middle age to completely crash. Even a mild cold. It clears up in days when you're young, but it can drag on for weeks later in life. This isn't a willpower issue. This is just the inevitable result of your metabolic networks losing their redundancy. This turning point happens in your 40s, right in the middle of middle age. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences tracked over 19,000 participants. They found that brain aging follows a non-linear trajectory, with that very first critical turning point hitting right in your 40s. And this is exactly why Chinese medicine particularly emphasizes the idea of nurturing qi in your 40s. Those ancient doctors had no microscopes and no mass spectrometers, but millennia of clinical observation told them the exact same thing, that after 40, the quality and the flow of your qi begin to deteriorate. Modern science hasn't rewritten this observation. It has simply confirmed it. Now, you might be thinking, look, I'm already taking all these supplements. Why am I still so tired? Well, it's because energy problems are never just a single layer issue. Clinically speaking, energy loss actually happens across 4 distinct layers. First, there's the structural layer, where things like muscle loss and reduced circulation end up increasing your body's energy costs. Then you have the biochemical layer, where inflammation or nutrient imbalances reduce your actual energy supply. Deeper down, there's the cellular layer, where mitochondrial dysfunction limits your ATP output. And finally, the nervous layer, where chronic stress just continuously drains whatever energy reserves you have left. The problem is, most interventions only address one single layer. Take caffeine, for example. It forces energy expenditure, but it does absolutely nothing to restore your actual capacity. Or sleep optimization. That helps the nervous layer, but it's pretty much useless if the cellular engine itself is broken. Even exercise alone, it can actually be counterproductive if your cellular layer is already completely depleted. You see the pattern? You're putting band-aids on symptoms, rather than repairing the entire system. True recovery requires a systematic approach. The sequence matters. First, you have to repair your energy production capacity, what Chinese medicine calls tonifying qi. Then, you unblock the metabolic pathways, or invigorate the blood. And only after that, do you gradually start to increase your activity and movement. This isn't just common sense. It's the modern biological interpretation of that ancient Chinese medical wisdom. Tonify first, then unblock, and ultimately, combine them both. So, what do we actually do about this? Well, that 2025 model identified a few potential ways to intervene. They talked about elevating NAD+ levels, increasing ketone bodies, and optimizing exercise and intermittent fasting. Translated into real, actionable steps, that means exercise, cognitive challenges, and nutritional optimization. But here is a really critical detail, and it's something Dr. Yang repeatedly emphasizes in his clinical practice. Simply supplementing NAD precursors is often not enough. Why is that? Because if your metabolic pathways are already blocked, no amount of supplementation is going to flow through. In Chinese medicine, they call this qi stagnation. Think of it like this. You're desperately adding water to a pipe, which is like taking your NAD supplements, but the pipe itself is completely clogged. It doesn't matter how much water pressure you have, nothing is getting through. So, what is the correct strategy? It's a two-way balance. First, you replenish, using those NAD precursors to support energy production. But second, and just as importantly, you have to unblock. That means controlling chronic inflammation and making sure your metabolic pathways actually stay clear. This isn't about boosting your energy. This is about restoring your body's capacity to generate energy. What's the difference? Well, caffeine is just stimulation. It forces your body to spend energy you don't really have. But NAD support is restoration. It actually rebuilds your energy account. One makes you overdraw, while the other gets you back on track. Let's return to that opening question we started with. You wake up tired. Your doctor looks at the normal test results and tells you, it's just aging. But now, you know the truth. This isn't an inevitable part of growing older. Your cells are simply sending you an alert. They're telling you that your energy networks are losing their redundancy, that your NAD reserves are depleting, and that you are approaching that metabolic cliff. See, fatigue isn't the enemy. It's information. When you finally understand it, not as some kind of character flaw and not as inevitable aging, but as a decodable biological signal, then everything changes. You stop fighting your body, and you actually start working with it. The title of that 2025 study reads, Pathways Toward and Away from the Metabolic Cliff. I want you to notice that word, and. There are paths toward the cliff, and there are paths away from it. Exercise, Intermittent fasting and cognitive challenges, those are paths away. While a sedentary lifestyle, chronic stress, and nutrient deficiencies, those are paths toward. Every single day, you're simply choosing a direction. That is all for today's episode. I hope it brings some fresh inspiration to your health and wellness journey. Thank you for listening. I'm Ivy. Next time, we're diving deep into the methylation trap. I'll explain exactly why some people end up feeling wired but tired after taking supplements. We'll also talk about why methylation corresponds to what Chinese medicine calls blood, and how to figure out if your own system needs a bit of a tune-up. Most importantly, I'll show you how to safely and effectively balance your energy and your methylation. I'm Ivy. This is the East-West Longevity Protocol by OptiNourish. Remember, your body wants to heal. If you give it the right signals, it will respond. I'll see you next week.